Why, hello there. If you're watching this the way I intended for you to, this should be the first video in a playlist of Japanese lessons using everybody's favorite textbook resource, Manga. However, before we get to the first episode of that little series, I'd like to go over some things here. Gonna try and keep it as brief as possible. I do have a problem keeping things brief, but you can think of today as orientation day. We're basically going to go over some basics that you need to know before we get into the actual lessons. Okay, first a little spiel about who I am. You can call me Sammy Senpai. While I am going to be teaching you guys some Japanese, I think the teacher title is just a little bit too formal for what I do. So, you know what? You don't have to think of me as your sensei. That carries a lot of baggage anyway. Think of me as your senpai. I'm somebody who's learning the language just like you are, but I've been here for a little while. I might have learned some things that can help you out, and I'm going to be teaching you those things. I am an amateur translator. What that basically means is I mostly do translation as a hobby, but I do freelance translation work, mainly in the manga sector, and I have gotten paid for translating manga before. I just haven't done anything big, so you're not going to see my name on like a Jujutsu Kaisen volume or anything. I did recently get hired at a translation company, so fingers crossed that by the next time I make a video like this, you're going to see professional translator there instead of amateur translator. I have been teaching the language for well over 7 years now in various forms. I've taught a middle school after school program, I've taught a college class, I've given lectures, and I have I know a thing or two about the language and teaching the language. I consider myself pretty enthusiastic when it comes to the world of teaching. I think it's something I'm pretty good at. Another way that I have taught the language is I work as a private tutor, so that is probably the way that I've made most of my money from teaching Japanese. And I want to emphasize here that I am still learning the language myself. I am not perfect, but you know what? I have gotten far enough that I'm able to translate manga, so I think I can still help you out a bit. So, enough about me. What exactly are we doing here? What I am basically going to do is turn a manga into a Japanese textbook. We are going to go through a manga, we're going to do it right from the source, and we are not going to change anything too much to make it easier. We are going to learn actual Japanese from an actual Japanese manga in the order that it presents the words to us. There's going to be some divisive thought here. Some people are going to say, well, am I really good enough to get into a manga I just started? I want to assure you that I made this course for complete beginners. It does not matter what level you're currently at, even if you don't know a single bit of Japanese, you can learn from these videos. So I do not want anybody to be scared off by the fact that we're jumping straight into native material. I am telling you, I am here to help you through it, and I think this is going to be a great way for you to incorporate some natural materials into your learning path. The big thing here is going to be, yes, if you feel that it is a little bit unnatural to learn from a manga, you are correct in some cases. Obviously, it's not going to be tailor-made for a learner, so we are going to have to learn a few things out of order. We're going to learn things that are slightly above your pay grade. We're going to learn things that are in kind of a strange order. But you know what? My philosophy on this is this. You can either spend 3 or 4 months getting enough basic Japanese under your belt to the point that you can maybe read a manga, or you can just learn directly from the manga itself for 3 or 4 months. You know what? I think you're going to get a little bit further if your goal is to get into Japanese media, if you want to watch your animes without the subtitles, if you want to read manga, if you want to play the Japanese video games, the visual novels, whatever you kids do now, then you are going to benefit just as much from learning straight from the source. The only downside from learning from the source, obviously, is it's difficult to do that on your own. But you know what? Senpai's got you, okay? With me here, I think this is going to be just fine. Now, in addition to that, because I do have experience in the translation field, I can also, on top of teaching you Japanese, give you some translation tips. So if you are also interested in getting into Japanese localization or just doing some fan translating, I might be able to teach you a thing or two about that too. Believe it or not, it's not just knowing Japanese. There is actually a little bit more to it than just knowing the language when it comes to localization. So hopefully I can help you out there as well. Now, while I said that there aren't really any prerequisites and you don't need to know any Japanese going into this, I am technically lied because I am going to recommend that you at least know hiragana and katakana. And you know what? There's in today's day and age, there literally is no excuse for not just knowing hiragana and katakana. Yes, you could just watch the videos and pick it up through osmosis or just listening to the sound of my voice, but there's no reason for it. Okay, there are so many ways to learn hiragana and katakana. It's taking people like 2 or 3 days to get both of these alphabets down. I say just go out and do it. Google is your friend here. You can watch a YouTube video about hiragana and katakana. Heck, download your Duolingos, your Lingo Deers, your Busus, whatever it is you guys use nowadays. All of them have a section dedicated to learning hiragana and katakana. I promise you, it's not going to take that long. Highly recommend you do that before you get into it. However, you do not need to know a single kanji before you get into these videos. I'm going to be teaching you every single kanji that you need to know, so don't worry about that at all. Just get the 2 basic alphabets down. As for the manga that we're going to be covering first, we're going to start off strong with the Pokemon manga. This is one of my all-time favorite mangas to use to teach people Japanese. I've used it in a lot of private lessons. I've taught a group class on it. It's so perfect in the way that it was made for a Japanese language learner. Now, I will admit I am taking a little bit of a gamble here, going after a Nintendo IP right off the bat, but hopefully I can keep the Nintendo ninjas at bay by pointing out that I did purchase this manga legally on DL's site. I do own a license to this manga, so hopefully that keeps them away. Is that going to work? I have no idea. They could come after me anyway. If something happens and I cannot continue to cover this manga, we'll figure something else out. But for right now, this is the one that I want to do. For real, though, I cannot stress this enough. I do legally own this manga. This is all the proof that you need. It's there in my purchase history. It does not have a purchase button there. It's got a stream button, meaning that I bought it and I can view it. Now, I am not your dad, I am your senpai, so I cannot tell you what to do. I'm sure if you looked out there real hard, you could probably find a copy of this without spending the $3, but you know what? It's $3. I say that if you are going to purchase a copy of this manga to follow along, or if after these lessons you want to go through and read the manga yourself, I'd say just spend the $3. At some point, there's probably going to be an affiliate link, so buying the manga will also help out with these lessons. You know, they'll give me a kickback, something like 20 to 30 cents per manga sold. So, you know, it helps out the channel as well. I highly recommend that you go out and purchase the manga that you read online, and I have to say that legally to keep everybody off my back. Okay, so yeah. Now, luckily, this is not going to be a problem at all with the Pokemon manga, but we're going to future-proof this a bit. Even the most popular and tame children's media in Japan does have a little bit of, let's just say I'm going to have to censor a few things out in some cases. If that ever happens, you're going to see these censor bars here. I will be offering an uncensored version on Patreon. Now, when it comes to sexualized content and children's media, I am not here to argue with you. I'm not here defending it. I'm not here attacking it. I am just stating simply how it is. Right now, we are in YouTube's house. We need to play by YouTube's rules. I cannot show some of the things, even in the most tame manga like One Piece or Naruto. There's going to be a couple of times where I probably have to censor something out. If it bothers you that gosh darn much, I'm going to have an uncensored version always available on the Patreon. So come on by and see it there if it bothers you. But if it doesn't bother you, don't even worry about it. It's going to be the exact same video, just without the censorship bar. Now let's get into how the actual lessons themselves are going to work, starting with my color coding system. If you see black lettering like you do here, I've put a little square over it to show you exactly what black lettering looks like in case you somehow didn't realize. That is going to be new vocabulary. It's going to be the crux of the entire learning process. If you see the black letters, it means that is a brand new word that we have not yet covered. After we have seen a word, that word will go from being in black lettering to being in red lettering, and that will be an indication to you that we have already covered that word in a previous lesson. So I'm going to create a system that makes it easier to go back and look for words that are in red that maybe you don't remember seeing. But for the most part, know that if it is in red lettering, it means that we have seen it before, so you should hypothetically know what it means, or at least be able to go back and refresh your memory. Orange characters, that is going to be an ending. Endings are going to be a bit of a vast or vague term. Just know that for the most part, words are made up of the core and the ending. The actual core of the word, which is going to be in the black or red lettering, is what the word actually means. The orange part represents how it's being used within the sentence. That's going to make a lot more sense when we get into it. Just know that a word is, for the most part, made up of both the black or red lettering plus the orange part that tells you how it's being used. Proper nouns or names of things specific to the manga in question are going to be in purple lettering, so if you can read that little bit there, then that means you basically know exactly who's going to show up in the very first chapter. But for the most part, if a word is in purple, it is somebody's name or, again, something specific to the manga, usually going to be written in katakana because the Japanese love to use katakana to name things. So, for example, even though the words Pokémon trainer are not necessarily a proper noun, it is the name of something specific to the Pokemon universe, so it's not going to be something that helps you out reading other manga, really. That is going to also be in purple. Next up are going to be particles, which are in green. If you do not know what a particle is yet, just know it's a small sound that shows how a word is being used within a sentence. Particles are also sometimes going to be the only way that you can keep certain words apart from one another. Since Japanese doesn't naturally have spacing within their language, the only way you'll be able to see where a break in a sentence is if there is a particle separating the words in some cases. Noises are going to be in blue. This is going to be a bit of a controversial one. Some people would consider these vocabulary words. I personally do not. For the most part, I think Japanese is well documented for this. It gets memed to death. Japanese characters saying, oh, oh. When things like that happen, usually it's going to indicate something about the character's mental state, or it's going to be a reaction to something that they're seeing. They're going to be happy noises, they're going to be sad noises, they're going to be surprise noises. When those things happen, they're going to be in blue. What that basically means is that doesn't necessarily translate cleanly to a word in a lot of cases. It just says something about what's happening, the character, or the situation that the character is currently in. I will be going in depth as to what the noise indicates and what to think when you see it, but again, I don't really consider it a vocabulary word. It doesn't normally cleanly translate from one word to another. Now that we're done with the colors, let's talk about something I call dot slashes. If you type a slash in the Japanese keyboard, it creates a dot. Therefore, I call them dot slashes. But what they are there for is to keep two of the same concept separate from one another so that you do not get them confused. If you'll notice here, there is a no and there is a ka, and those are two separate particles, but they just so happen to be placed right next to each other within this speech bubble. What that basically means is I'm going to teach them separately, even though they're right next to each other. So this is your way of knowing that they are separate concepts, not the same concept, because it would get confusing otherwise. If you're an eagle-eyed viewer, you might have also noticed that there is another one right above it in orange. What that means is there are two endings not just one, so we'll be going over them separately. Again, all of this is going to be super second nature to you as soon as we actually get started. Don't get overwhelmed by it now. Just get a general idea of what's going on so that you know what's happening when we actually start. A couple of little things about my formatting. Firstly, no furigana at all. I have taken all the furigana out of the manga. I see it as an unnecessary crutch if you have somebody actively teaching you the language and can tell you what all of the readings are. It is going to benefit you slightly to just learn how to read each of the characters without the furigana if that option is available to you. I don't hate furigana. I think it's an amazing tool if you are trying to self-study and learn things on your own, but I think in a class environment or a lesson environment like we have here, it is slightly unnecessary since I'll be saying the characters out loud to you and showing you how they are read. If you want to use them in your own private study, I cannot stop you there. Go for it, but I will not be using them here when we study in these lessons. You'll also notice that I'm using a different font that will be slightly more legible, so I don't want anybody pointing that out later. I do have a different font that I'm using from the original font to make it a bit easier on the eyes, slightly easier as a learning resource. In addition to this, you will not be seeing vertical lettering. Now, I'm just going to be totally real with you. I am a simple man. I use Paint for all of my editing, okay? Good old Windows Paint, a little bit difficult to do vertical lettering. That's the main reason that I'm not doing it. But also, on top of that, I think as a Japanese learner, it's a little bit easier to read the typical left to right formatting than it is to read the top to bottom formatting that you'll see in manga and some light novels. And I don't feel that bad about it. Let's be completely honest. It's not that difficult to go back and do the whole vertical lettering if that is what you want to learn how to do. I don't think they're so different from one another that you're just going to make it impossible for yourself to read a manga if you start learning it with the typical lettering. And you know what? Japan kind of agrees with me. A lot of their novels nowadays and a lot of their video games are written with the typical left to right lettering. So, you know what? I think it's more useful to do it this way anyways, okay? Even though it does come from my own sense of laziness, I do think in the end it is going to be very beneficial. Everything about it is better. I'm going to do it this way, but if you are interested in the vertical lettering, you can go out and get the manga yourself and see it that way, because it's not going to be that way here in these lessons. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how these lessons are actually going to go. Basically, what I would like to do is cover a minimum of 10 concepts in every single video. So we have a hypothetical scenario here. Let's say that we start where the number 1 is on the word yawn. What we're going to do is start there, cover everything within the bubble that we haven't covered before. If you'll remember, that character there in red is something we've covered previously, which is why it's being skipped over here. There's a method to the madness. So hypothetically, we start there. We get 3 little lessons out of that bubble. The next bubble, we go through 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We teach what all of those things mean. Then we get to the next bubble. 9 and 10 are going to be the words Pokémon and the particle O. So what do we do now? Now, it would be very awkward to end the lesson in the middle of a bubble and also in the middle of a panel. So, like I said before, we're going to do a minimum of 10 concepts, but we are not going to stop in the middle of a bubble or in the middle of a panel. Since I'm also teaching you guys how to translate, I think it would be very awkward to stop in the middle of a panel because there's a lot of context that's going to be lost in between lessons if we do it that way. So we're going to go with each of these videos until we get to the end of a panel, but we're going to go until we've got at least 10 concepts covered. Okay, you got it? It's pretty simple stuff. Just know that these videos are going to vary slightly in length. Sometimes we're going to hit 10 concepts very, very, very quickly, so it's going to be like a 15 to 20 minute video. Sometimes it's going to take us a lot longer, and it's going to be like an hour and a half video if I've got a lot of stuff to explain. Once we have covered all of the concepts for one panel, I am going to show you something that looks a lot like this. I'm going to give you a little cheat sheet that goes back over what everything within the bubble means. And this is the part that I find the most fun. You are going to get to practice translating yourself. I'm going to give you a little bit of time. You're free to pause the video to take as much time as you like to come up with a translation for what is indicated in the panel. Now we're going to do the entire panel all at once because sometimes characters are playing off of each other and you're going to use some of the words from one bubble to explain what's going on in another bubble. This is how translation works. If you happen to get lost and you've forgotten what a concept means, I have a bit of a system here to help you go back and relearn that concept or just hear the explanation for what that means again. What I'm doing is putting a number, and that is going to be the lesson that that concept was covered in, as well as a timestamp for going back and actually rewatching that part of the video if you really need to, okay? Senpai's gotcha. Senpai's gotcha. So in this example here, you can go back to lesson 1 to relearn exasperated at 10 minutes and 27 seconds in, and the word for I or me at 2 minutes and 34 seconds in. If you want to go back and listen to my explanation on the mo particle, that's going to be in video number 4, 6 minutes and 11 seconds in. And if you notice that there is not a number, just a timestamp, then that means that we covered it previously within the same video that you're currently watching. So if you were on your phone, or if you just didn't quite get it the first time, you're free to go back to that timestamp within the video that you are currently watching. Once I've given you a chance to translate the panel for yourself, I will swoop in and give you not 1, not 2, but 3 possible translations that I have for the panel in question. The very first translation I have is going to be the most literal possible translation of what is being said. It is basically going to be word for word what the Japanese says, maybe tweaked very, very, very slightly to turn it into a natural English sentence, but it is going to be the absolute closest I can get to what the words in the bubble actually mean. For a lot of you out there who think that this is what translation is, this is basically going to be the one that you probably agree with the most. Just keep in mind that in some cases, doing it this way can be extremely robotic and does not always lead to a very natural or good translation. The second translation I'm going to offer you is going to be slightly cleaned up a little bit. It's going to still have most of the words from the bubble, but maybe just an alternate reading or maybe a slightly more stretched out meaning to accommodate a slightly more nuanced take on what is being said. In a lot of cases, words can be used in multiple instances and they can be translated different ways based on the instance in which you're using them, depending on the context of what is actually going on. The third one, the one that's going to be the most controversial in most cases, is going to be a complete English rewrite of what is being said within the bubble. Now, if you're somebody who's a Japanese purist and you cannot stand the idea of the English rewriting parts of a Japanese manga because you need everything to be as literal and as close to the original as possible, and I cannot believe that some people prefer to rewrite things in English, just hand over your eyes, take off your headset, take some deep breaths. You don't have to pay attention to that part of the video, I suppose. But I do want to let you know that if you're interested in getting into translation as a career or localization as a career, a lot of companies and a lot of editors that you work with are going to prefer an English rewrite. Translators are not just robots who turn one word from Japanese into a word in English. We are often writers who have a very specific set of things that we have to write around. So as much as you may personally hate it, as much as you might loathe the concept of people preferring the English rewrite over the original literal Japanese interpretation, gross. I bet those people watch the dub too. You're going to have to accept that that's the way it is in this industry. And if you really hate it, just don't focus on that one, you know. But for the rest of you, that is going to basically be what we're doing. As far as learning materials go, I highly recommend you make your own learning materials, but if you do not want to, if you are very lazy, or if you just love your senpai ever so much and you want the materials that I personally have, I am going to be making a personalized word list of all the concepts that we go over. This here is not from the Pokemon manga. I want to be clear. It's not from any manga. It's from my private lessons. And also, I will be offering an Anki deck for every single one of the videos that you're about to watch. Again, I need to stress this because it's very important. You do not need these materials, but if you want them made personally by me because you do not want to make them yourself, I will be offering them on my Patreon. If I'm going to be sitting down and making these materials, I would like a little bit of kickback from it. So, you know, you can have your own personal feelings on it. That's totally fine. I want to stress for a third time, you do not need these whatsoever. They are very, very, very easy to make yourself, and you can probably make them even better than I can. But I will be offering these on the Patreon if you're interested in having them. In addition to the word lists and the Anki decks, which will be there for sure, I'm also pretty good at making other resources. So we have homework, we've got handouts that kind of go back over basic concepts. And I also have little cheat sheets that I can make you that will help with verb conjugations or whatever it is that you're struggling with. I haven't decided yet as to what exactly I'll be making to put up on the Patreon. Do keep in mind that this is the very first set of lessons in this little series that I'm planning on doing. So there's a lot of things that have not necessarily been ironed out yet, but do know that these are also an option as well. I just don't want to go through the trouble of making them if they're not something that people are actually interested in. Now, this is something that you're not going to notice for a very, very, very long time, but there will come a point where we have covered so many concepts within the manga itself that we are going to be going a very long time before we see enough concepts to end a video. When this happens, I'm going to need some kind of limit on when a video actually ends. Right now, I have two limits in mind. One, if we go 5 pages and we still have not gotten 10 new concepts, I think that's a pretty decent time to end the video. I want to, again, stress that this is not set in stone yet. We can definitely change this. In fact, if you are watching this kind of video like 4 or 5 months out, I might have already changed it. But for right now, I'm thinking if we go 5 pages, that is enough for a full video. The other limit is going to be about 30 minutes. I think 30 minutes for a lesson is basically the perfect time. I know I'm never going to hit it. It's always going to be a super long video or a super short video, depending on what we have. But ideally, if we've gone 30 minutes, and we still don't have all of the concepts we need for a full lesson, we're going to go ahead and just end it there. Speaking of which, let's also talk about the end game. We're going to do these lessons basically in chapters. So once we have gotten to the end of the very first Pokemon manga's first chapter, we are going to either pivot to a brand new manga, or we are going to continue the Pokemon series until we get to the end of the second chapter. Because each of the chapters in the Pokemon manga are about 15 pages, that means we are going to probably have about 25 to 30 different lessons before we get to the end of this little series of lessons here. So if we do happen to go on to a brand new manga, I want you guys to know that we will be starting completely over from scratch. You're going to be seeing another video just like this, and we are going to be basically reteaching every single concept that I've taught previously in the Pokemon manga as well. But obviously in a new manga, there's no guarantee that the same concepts will be talked about in the same order. So this is going to mean a couple of things for you guys. Firstly, I know some of you are going to be thinking, well, what if I wanted to just keep all the knowledge I had from the Pokemon manga and carry it over to whatever the new manga that we cover is? Is there going to be something offered at some point that allows me to do that? Short answer there is yes, but I have not worked that out yet, so we're going to stay kind of quiet on that. it will be offered in the future, but do know that I want every single manga that we go through to be a brand new starting point for new people who want to jump in. And you know what? It might benefit you a little bit to refresh your memory on some concepts as well. As for what that new manga is going to be, I haven't really figured out how I'm going to do this yet. It could be some kind of voting system. And as upset as it's going to make some of you, it's probably at some point going to be something that the patrons on my Patreon select. We're probably going to try and go through a few different genres here. Can't just stick to Pokemon all the time. We're going to get into some shonen stuff. We're probably going to get into some romance or comedy stuff. We're basically going to hop around, learn concepts from a bunch of different manga, and I think it's going to benefit you guys in the end. Alrighty, that will about do it for today. If you need to get a hold of me, there are a few different things you can do. I will say for the sake of transparency here, I have not created some of these yet. So there is going to be a Discord link at some point. Recommend checking the channel for that to see if it's up yet. Obviously, the Patreon is going to be up, so if you'd like to support these lessons, support what I do here, please consider checking that out. There's going to be some stuff there. None of it's going to be required at all for the lessons, but if you want like the uncensored videos, and in the future, if you want to help select the mangas that we talk about in these videos, highly recommend you go and check it out there. Here in the YouTube comments, please let me know if you have any questions or if there's anything I can clarify for you. Obviously, there's going to be something that I've missed here. I'm more than happy to answer those questions in the comment section below. And finally, if you want to talk to me about anything work-related, if you're interested in private lessons, or if you are interested in having me translate something for you, please feel free to email me at the email link below. Alrighty, but again, that'll about do it. Looking forward to getting started with our first set of lessons, and I hope you are as excited as I am. Bye for now.